a social cultural critic, and we believe that he will bring to this discussion to get us started on worship, culture, and preaching in the black church tradition that has been a part of this Afro-American Lectionary project, to get us moving with this dialogue that is so important as we see it. We're glad to have you come, and bless you as you come to share at this moment. Thank you. Let's give him a hand. Thank you.
The challenge with long introductions is that they set high expectations. I want to say thank you to Dr. Harris for his visionary leadership of this work. To many of you who I have read your work and in various ways struggled alongside you, is Lisa Thompson and Bridget Green around? I want to say thank you for their guidance and work and getting me here. And then I see Monica Miller in the audience, who I met while getting her PhD. She's done now. She's Dr. Monica Miller. You ought to clap about that. Who I'm glad to see. And there are so many other folk. I was just in San Francisco a few days ago, and so I made my way over to Oakland, and I just can't get a chance to see him, but just stood in the shadow of J. Alfred Smith and his wonderful work in that place. It's to my understanding, I have about 30 minutes. I am a third-generation Pentecostal preacher, so I'm going to be uncharacteristically brief. I see the Thompson family, Floyd Thomas family, who I've admired their work so greatly. Just want to say thank you for your work. Union made a mistake. I'm just going to leave that there. I want to situate myself. I want to lay bare a few elementary remarks, and then hopefully we just open up for a little bit of Q&A. It is good to be in the South. I was raised about 7 hours from here in a little place called Zent, Arkansas. Had 11 houses. Nashville and Memphis were the big city to us. My grandfather, a railroad worker and a preacher, and his grandfather and his father before him founded churches for C.H. Mason. And so I am a Pentecostal by birth. And I'm reminded of those simple people in Zent, Arkansas. Many of them couldn't write their names. Miss Roberta used to make her mark. And she said, "Come here, boy, and read to me about our people. Everything I know about being an intellectual comes mostly from folks who couldn't write their names." So I want to anchor myself there, that these people were in possession of a theological sophistication that is yet to be unpacked, that they were engaged in a profound theological project because they understood something that the existentialists have wrestled with in France. I am a bit of a Francophile. I spent a little time in Paris. I was just there a few weeks ago trying to explain to them at the Sorbonne what my grandmother was talking about, and that Sartre would have been a little better off if he would have spent a little time with her. So Sartre raises the question, why go on? My grandmother said, why not? Because she understood something about the world in which we were in. So the reason why they deployed certain kind of existential notions about the way in which they languaged Jesus. So they said things like Jesus is a bright and morning star. For the night of slavery was set against them, but they understood that there was a little light inside of there. So water in dry places and doctors in a sick room, while we often see them as a kind of cliches within the framework of African-American religious parlance, what they are doing is that they are rendering an understanding of the world that it might be dark, but the darkness will not have the last word. And in the midst of the darkness, they will sing a song. And so these old women and men who raised me, they would moan these hymns that had a kind of ontological value to them. There was a disruption, and when they sang, "I love the Lord, he heard my cry and pitied every groan," and the congregation would respond. And what they were doing was entering a kind of cosmic understanding of the world, that their moans would move history. Now I currently pastor in New York City, in South Jamaica, Queens. My church sits at the center of the foreclosure crisis. Over 134 houses have been foreclosed upon around in a 4-block radius of my church. There are 145,000 families in our city council district, not one community center, 3 libraries. 2 of them are going to be closed, and just a month ago, someone was shot in front of the parsonage. It would seem as though that these young people do not have access to the kind of spiritual weaponry that I was bequeathed by these simple people within Zint, Arkansas. And so by situating myself as a good existentialist, I want to lay bare a kind of frame, if you will, a kind of existential bookends by 2 of my soulmates. The great Albert Camus says that the artist must never side with those who are the makers of history, but rather those who are the victims of it. And James Baldwin, that queer black man who left the church, but the church never left him, who says that the artist must embrace that state of being that most humans must necessarily avoid, and that is the state of being alone. And so then, if we just simply replace those words, a kind of eisegesis on these existentialist texts, and say that the preacher must never side with those who are the makers of history, but rather those who are the victims of it, and that the preacher must embrace that state of being that most humans must necessarily avoid, that is the state of being alone. Secondly, I want to make 2 essentialist claims. And among these essentialist claims, predicated on the information that I gave before that is rendered in the spirituals and in the hymns. That first essentialist claim has to do with that black religion is a left of center project, because it begins with the humanity of black people inside the American empire. And that is a revolutionary notion. Secondly, the second essentialist claim that I want to make is that black people historically have read the Bible in one hand and in the Constitution other. Although democracy was a circumscribed experience for them, that they took the language of the democratic institutions and fashioned them for themselves. It's that great slave woman, Sojourner Truth, says, "Children, God talk to me. Children, God talks to me. I tell you that God talks to me. God takes me up, and he shows me this wheat standing proud and tall, but when I reach and grab hold to the wheat, ain't none there. There's a little weasel in it. Children, God talks to me. Children, God talks to me. I hear folks talking about this Constitution, but when I reach and I grab hold of it for my rights, ain't none there. There's a little weasel in it." Sojourner Truth understood that the language of democracy was in conversation with the biblical text in such a way that God wanted her to have access to democratic rights. The third move that I want to make is that I want to acknowledge and accept, and if not concede, Eddie Glaude's claim that the black church is dead. Equally, I want to honor and accept the claim made by Kevin Powell in this month's of Ebony magazine that black leadership is dead. I want to honor the critiques that Anthony Penn has made in terms of looking at various forms and structures in which young people have attempted to engage in religiosity and religious subjectivity outside of the subhegemony of the black church, the same work that Monica Miller has been doing. I want to concede that territory to them. That within the framework and the historical narrative of the black church, it would seem as though that it is dead. So I want to talk about resurrection. What does the resurrection of the black church look like? What are the terms of engagement? What is the salvific paradigm? It cannot be rendered in the Exodus narrative, which is predicated on certain triumphalist notions that are deeply American. Perhaps it is rendered in the best of the exilic work that we might see in Ezekiel and other places, but I want to pin our conversation and look at our salvific paradigm and redemptive notion in the book of Mark, the 16th chapter, the 1st through 8th verse, which is historically verifiable because we understand the 9 and other verses were added later. They are not historically verifiable texts predicated on the work of Chad Myers and my dear friend Aubrey Hendricks in his text, The Politics of Jesus. So there in that historically verifiable text in the book of Mark, we find some women trembling at a tomb. And they're trembling at a tomb by virtue of a historical narrative as it related to a first century Palestinian Jew born in Roman occupied territory. Born to a single mother, a first century precious. Narrative, the historical evidence would suggest to us that Mary was around 13 years old when she became pregnant. And that the word that they put out on Jesus, one of the ways they undermined his ministry is that he was the birth of a rape by a Roman centurion. Here, this first century Palestinian Jew in a Roman occupied situation whereby he understood himself to be living inside such a way. The sun did not set on the Roman Empire. It was the most powerful empire in human history at the time. And he engaged in a kind of insurrection against that empire. For Caesar Augustus said that he was the S-U-N of God. And so by Jesus making the claim that he is the S-O-N of God, it is a counter-imperial narrative that Jesus is engaging in. He is saying of himself that the empire will not have the last word. But the way of Jesus is the way of the cross. It is not predicated on levels of ease. It is predicated on confronting the empire to the point that they want to take your life. This is what Jesus of Nazareth is engaging in with this renegade band of disciples, this mystic Palestinian cult. It does not become Christianity until Antioch. They have no idea what they've gotten themselves into. And so his constant offense of the empire by sitting and supping with those who did not matter. The great Abraham Joshua Heschel says the Bible is a book about God taking unimportant people seriously. This is who Jesus spends his time with. And so Jesus finds himself executed at the hands of the state. And so whatever religious narratives and theological discourses that we need to hang on it, so be it. But let us be clear, Jesus was murdered by the empire with the collusion of cowardly religious leaders. And so now we are in Mark, the 16th chapel. He is dead. And there are some trembling women there. Professor Christopher Moore says that the gospel begins with the petty gossip of women. What are these women talking about? He's risen. They have no standing, they have no state. But they say he's risen. And Jesus offers this interesting metaphor, and this is why in my church, I don't preach past that 9th chapter, that 9th verse. He says, tell my disciples, if they're looking for me, I'm on the road to Galilee. What is in Galilee? Galilee is juxtaposed to Jerusalem. It is not the theological center. It is not the place of political power. Nazareth is in Galilee. They would rob you and kill you and murder you on your way to Galilee. It is a simple place where trivial people are. Why are you returning to this place where nothing good can come from? I believe this is the salvific paradigm for us as relates to the question of the resurrection of the black church. And so I want to offer these 4 concentric circles as a means to have a conversation about what does his resurrection look like.